The Panama Papers controversy linking politicians and celebrities gets renewed attention. The trial of two former Rwandan officials accused of genocide opens in Paris. And Uganda's only radiotherapy machine breaks down, leaving thousands of cancer patients desperate. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, the so-called Panama Papers affair that erupted last month is getting renewed attention as a huge database of documents linking rich politicians and celebrities with offshore tax havens goes online. The documents confirm what has been suspected a long time, that the global elite use shell companies to avoid paying taxes on their wealth. VOA's Laditza Hoke reports.
Making the data available to the general public is likely to cause even more upheaval than the initial revelation. People worldwide will be able to search the database of offshore accounts linked to more than 200 countries and territories.
I think the biggest bombshell is that we are putting the power back in the hands of citizens.
Last month's news reports about offshore accounts embarrassed several political leaders, including Britain's David Cameron and Russia's Vladimir Putin, and brought down high-level officials in Iceland and Spain. Investigative journalists are now urging people worldwide to get involved in the effort to improve global financial transparency.
So tell us, like in countries where we didn't have an opportunity to work, and there are many of those, who did we miss?
The Panama-based law firm and its clients named in the Panama Papers have denied any wrongdoing. Tax havens are not illegal, but they are harmful because they spare the rich from paying their share of taxes and place more burden on middle and low-income citizens. 300 economists signed a letter Monday urging world leaders to abolish tax havens, saying they boost inequality and harm the global economy.
The secrecy of tax havens is very often abused, and that shell companies, anonymous companies, are used for an array of crimes that go from money laundering to drug trafficking to arms trafficking, serious fraud.
The information is searchable by country, name, address, and more. Sensitive information, such as bank accounts and personal information, is not available. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Now, world leaders, NGOs and financial institutions prepare to gather in London on Thursday for an anti-corruption summit that host Prime Minister David Cameron has said will spur new global action in the wake of the Panama Papers leaks. About 40 countries have been invited alongside bodies such as the World Bank and the IMF, with the presidents of Afghanistan, Colombia and Nigeria, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry among those due to attend. Now, for a preview of the upcoming London summit, Maggie Murphy of Transparency International joins me live via Skype from London. Maggie, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, surely could there have been a better time for this kind of summit?
Definitely not. But it's not just on the back of the Panama Papers. We've just had 1, 2, 3 years of really big corruption scandals hitting the news. When you think about the FIFA scandal, or you think about Petrobras in Latin America, or you think about what happened in the Ukraine, all of these events are now coming to fruition. It is a really perfect time to have a global anti-corruption summit.
Now, we know that corruption takes different forms in different countries. What really can we expect to be put on the table during this summit on Thursday?
Well, what's really interesting about this summit is that there is only one agenda item, corruption. In many other global summits, they're talking about an array of issues. But as you say, there's lots of different types of corruption. What Transparency International hopes that we see is a focus on comprehensive reforms, not just one issue. We're looking for governments to be committing to prevent corruption, but also punish people who have been found complicit in corruption. And very importantly, we're looking for governments to protect citizens and whistleblowers, those people who are brave enough to report corruption in their countries.
But Maggie, in some of these countries, and I can think of many African countries, the leaders of those countries are themselves complicit in some of these corrupt cases. How do you expect them to take action against those who blow the whistle?
Well, this is a really big challenge for this type of summit. We know that Prime Minister Cameron has wanted to invite only countries that he thinks are willing to make ambitious commitments. We know, however, that there are a number of countries that are coming to the summit that do not have the best backgrounds. But what we're trying to see is whether there is a real ambition to change, whether these governments have listened to the people in their countries, have felt the anger on the back of the Panama Papers and said, okay, the time is right. We actually need to deal with this because of the impacts that corruption has on security or on our economies, on our citizens.
Now, would you say those who have a little more higher moral ground in terms of less corruption, like in some of the Western countries, can exert, sufficient pressure on some of the more corrupt countries, especially in the developed nations?
I don't think this is an issue about richer countries occupying moral ground and developing countries being the ones that have the corruption problem. In fact, what the Panama Papers showed us was just how complicit the middlemen, people that sit in nice fancy offices in rich countries around the world and make a profit of corruption. We've seen how the middlemen are complicit. We've also seen that some rich countries are very willing to receive corrupt funds. Maybe in the real estate market or in the luxury goods market. Yeah. So corruption cannot be seen as a developing country issue anymore.
Maggie will follow up on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, Maggie Murphy of Transparency International joined us live via Skype from London. Now, the trial of the two former Rwandan officials accused of genocide and crimes against humanity in 1994 opened in Paris on Tuesday. Some 90 witnesses and 6 experts must appear in court to enlighten the magistrates and jurors on the charges against Tito Barahira, 64, and Octavia Ngezi, who was 58 years old. The pair allegedly participated in a genocide that killed some 800,000 people in just 100 days between April and July 1994. Both men deny all charges. Barahira and Ngezi took turns holding the local leadership positions in Kabarondo in eastern Rwanda from 1977 to 1986 for Barahira and from 1986 to 1994 for Ngezi. Now, members of the public as well as relatives of victims appeared at the trial. This is the second such a trial to be held in France, coming 2 years after Rwandan Army Captain Pascal Simbikangwa was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He has since filed an appeal. Now, for more on the Paris trial, I'm joined by VOA Central Africa reporter Eddie Rema. Eddie, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we know this men have said, well, we are innocent, and that is what most of the accused say. Given that many, many years have passed, is it ever easier to get evidence to try this kind of people?
Considering the press release I just read from the organization representing genocide survivors, they said they have documented enough evidence to pin these two former leaders of a small town in eastern Rwanda. They are accused of killing over 2,000 refugees who are fleeing the genocide. Yeah. They had sought refuge in a Catholic church, and that's where they were killed as they were trying to run away from those who were hunting them, heading to Tanzania. So Ibuka, which is the organization representing genocide survivors, believes that this case should be expedited because they have enough information to pin these people.
Because the people who saw them, the people who know exactly what happened.
Absolutely, and like you said, they are sending out over close to 100 people to go to testify against these people.
We know that Rwanda has always insisted it wants these people extradited to Rwanda. But France holds on to them and says, no, we'll do whatever we need to do. Now, how does this play into the relationship between Rwanda and France?
Well, it's been a very hard war between the two countries. As you know, Rwanda for so many years has accused France of taking part and supporting the genocidal regime. At the same time, we've seen different French officials accusing the current Rwandan regime of downing down what they say was the plane that carried the presence of Rwanda and Burundi, which they said triggered the genocide. Yeah. So since then, the relationship between the two countries has not been really good, and that could be the reason as to why France is adamant to send genocide suspects to Rwanda to be tried there. But good enough, following the pressure from civil societies, genocide activists and stuff like that, they've been able to force the French government to start this court which tries genocide suspects in France, which is, it's not good. It's something not good for genocide survivors because they would wish to have those cases tried in Rwanda. But the fact that we see these trials is also a positive
At least
step.
some process towards getting some justice.
Absolutely.
Eddie, thank you very much
for
joining us today and giving us those insights. Eddie, viewers, Eddie Rema reporting there. Not too far from France, one man was killed and 3 others were wounded in a knife attack at a German railway station outside Munich Tuesday morning. Police say they have arrested a German man in connection with the attack, which occurred in a small town of Grafing, about 23 miles east of Munich. Police say they are still trying to determine what the man's exact remarks were, but local media report witnesses heard the assailant shout "Allahu Akbar" or "God is great" during the attack, indicating an apparent Islamist motive. This marks the 3rd knife attack in Germany with an apparent Islamist motivation since September. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at Vince Makori. Coming up, the African fashion industry is growing fast and could rake in billions of dollars. Stay with us.
This is Living Better.
Benjamin Alexander has autism and does not speak like 1 in 10 people with the disorder. But today, with the help of a laptop computer, he attends Tulane University in New Orleans. Educator Judy Norduff led Ben to expressing himself with a keyboard.
And I could see in his eyes the intelligence that was trapped in that body. And I knew we had to find a way to get it out.
Ben is an English major, getting good grades. His father, Sam, helps him type and get to class. Ben's computer is his human voice.
I am not stupid as some people used to think. I am not stupid as some people used to think.
Ben's mother, Ellen, says she doesn't try to look too far into the future for her son.
10 years ago, I never would have imagined, or even 5 years ago, that Ben would have been at Tulane.
And what does Ben expect?
I am not the autism poster boy, but I hope that people will make the effort to allow us to be heard.
I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
Welcome back. The African fashion industry is rapidly growing and could potentially be worth billions of dollars. Artists and designers like Nigeria's Tunde Owalabi are noticing this trend and are bringing to light some enduring traditional designs and fabrics. Ashoke is a fabric worn by the Yoruba people for thousands of years. VOA's Jackson Vunganyi spoke to Owalabi about the cultural value and beauty of Ashoke.
History shows that Africa's fabric industry dates back to as far as 5000 BC, to when ancient Egyptians were growing flax and weaving it into linen. Since then, in most African cultures, textiles are used as a form of expression and adornment. In Nigeria, one of the most enduring traditional fabrics is the Ashoke, worn mostly by the Yoruba people. It is a centuries-old fabric with roots in Nigeria's Oyo State. It's the beauty and rich history of this fabric that caught the eye of Lagos' best multimedia artist, Tunde Owalabi, who was working as a photographer at events where hundreds of guests were adorning the Ashoke.
It's a very important fabric for Nigerians, especially the Yoruba people. Some way, somehow you'll find Ashoke in, the traditional settings. Like, for instance, in Nigeria, you need to do the traditional wedding first before you probably go on to the white wedding for a lot of people. And I find out now a lot of people want to do the traditional wedding just because they want to wear the Ashoke.
Tunde later created a studio in Lagos with the intention of bringing together artists and other creatives to collaborate on projects. His journey took him to Oyo State in southwest Nigeria. It is considered the birthplace of the Ashoke. It's also home to hundreds of weavers. In Ishehin, Tunde found that every household owned multiple pieces of the ashoke, worn at different occasions. You got interested in ashoke as a print, as a cloth, and also as a culture. And then you traveled to a region where it's made. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what transpired.
So I decided to go there just to hear from people rather than depending on the information from the internet, because I know for sure there will be some old men, old women who have lived over time and
even they've passed
it down exactly, you know. So I wanted to see how it's transcended from one generation to another, which was a good thing, because it's so good. You find kids when they come back from school or whatever, they help to, you know, spun the wool.
Like in many African societies where fabrics are more than just a piece of cloth, for the Yoruba, the ashoke reflects the social and religious complexity of their society.
If we don't celebrate what we have, then it's all going to die. You know, because I know there was a time where the likes of damask, lace, you know, were like the thing for Nigerians. You would probably not see a lot of ashoke back then. You know, but now people really celebrate ashoke. It's the way ashoke is gone now. It's beyond what they used to do then. They've, you know,
it's on a whole other level.
Yeah, there's some kind of new innovation to it. They've created, you know, adding stones, adding illustrations onto them, you know, different things. So it's a bit more stylish. It's a bit more fun. It's fresh, unlike the regular patterns of, you know, just straight lines. You know, yeah.
Tunde's latest project is designing shoes for the global market. The shoe design incorporates different elements of the ashoke. For Voice of America, I'm Jackson Funganyi.
And it's time now for a health reporter, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with some new information on the global fight against AIDS. Lino.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says global progress fighting AIDS could be lost because prevention programs are suffering from a lack of leadership, accountability and funding. In a recently released report, Ban Ki-moon says headway in tackling the epidemic has been inspiring, quote, with a 42% decline in AIDS-related deaths since a peak in 2004. Antiretroviral therapy has been available to 15 million people in the last 15 years. But those gains could be lost without more and better investment in the next 5 years. The Sustainable Development Goals include a commitment to end the AIDS epidemic by 2030. Over the next 4 years, about $26 billion will be needed to achieve that 2030 target. The report also revealed that some 22 million people do not have access to treatment. Now, the World Health Organization is urging healthcare workers to improve patient safety through following proper hand hygiene practices. The WHO says healthcare-associated infections often occur when germs are transferred by the hands of health workers. Surgical site infections are the most frequent type of infection in low- and middle-income countries, with a combined incidence of 11.8% of surgical procedures. They can be prevented by health workers following standard hand hygiene practices. 8 million lives can be saved worldwide every year in hospitals alone by halting surgical site infections and other healthcare-associated infections. Uganda's only radiotherapy machine is broken, leaving thousands of patients without access to cancer treatment. The machine was over 30 years old and had broken down several times in the past. Granny Harrington has more from Kampala.
At the main hospice in Kampala, they do everything they can to make patients comfortable in their final days. Bronia is 28 years old. She was diagnosed with cervical cancer last year. With help from the hospice, she travelled 300 kilometres to Kampala for treatment. But now, after waiting over 3 weeks, she's been told to leave. The radiotherapy machine she was counting on for life-saving treatment is broken, and it can't be fixed.
I felt pain because I thought that if it works, we are going to be okay. and we get to recover. It has pained me because I have not yet produced any children. Even I've got loss of weight, bleeding every time.
This radiotherapy machine was a lifeline when it was brought to Uganda over 21 years ago, offering cancer patients life-saving treatment and relief from unbearable pain. But experts say it should have been replaced years ago. It had already broken down several times and exposed patients and staff to dangerous radiation. Dr. Jackson Orem is in charge of Uganda's Cancer Institute at the Malago Hospital in Kampala. He says a new machine was bought in Vienna 3 years ago, but the special bunker needed to house it was never built. Now, he says, with extra funding from the government, the new machine can finally be brought over, but it will still take time.
If they can even work 24 hours, within 6 months, we should have the bunker ready. Yeah, so that means the next half of the year, we should be installing the equipment and testing it. So by 1 year, it should be up and running.
For many, a year may be too long to wait. This country had been at the forefront of cancer care in the region. Patients travelled from all over Uganda, but also from Rwanda, Burundi and parts of Kenya and Tanzania to be treated here. It's estimated that 75% of cancer patients in this country need access to radiotherapy treatment. So why has it taken so long to ensure the equipment here is safe and up to date? The hospital blames funding, but some say there's a much bigger problem.
The Cancer Institute, when it appears before Parliament, they'll say the money you've given us is not enough. But even the money that is allocated to this Cancer Institute, oftentimes it's not absorbed. It does not do what it's supposed to do. Yes, so it's a whole systematic issue.
Patients who have the money are being advised to go to neighbouring Kenya for treatment. The government now says it can help some of them with funding. But for the majority, like Bronia, the only option is to go home and wait. Grania Harrington for VOA in Kampala.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch with me, find me on Twitter at Lenore Mudu. Vincent?
Well, thanks a lot, Lenore. Now be sure to watch Lenore Mudu's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. African artists experiment with the genre of artists' books. We'll be right back. Well, African artists are experimenting with the genre of artists' books, while international artists are exploring African themes in their books. Viewers Caroline Turner has more.
Artist Books in Africa is the first exhibit to focus on African artist books from the Smithsonian Libraries and the National Museum of African Art. Artist books are visual artworks that play with the format and push the boundaries. This genre has taken off in the last 2 decades.
This one is called Egyptian Green, which is interesting because we don't think of Egypt as a green country. But the artist who did this, Willa Lega, who is British, sees the green in Egypt.
The library has many books that are not under glass, which can be touched and held. These weren't always known as artist books.
They were scientific books.
What other mediums do you focus on?
They would have this paper engineering that would recreate the solar system and so forth. But artists have also picked up the genre and have been able to do some very creative things with them. So that's a pop-up, grids of the city.
This unusual book by Sudanese artist Hassan Musa is titled Application Zebra.
He's done this whole calligraphy thing. And look here, you've got the leopard and its spots from fishes. It keeps morphing. Here's its stars. It just keeps morphing into different kinds of things. It's like a Persian carpet. The more you look, the more you see going on in it. This is my favorite, the zebras.
Moroccan painter Tufik Baramadan displayed his book of lithographs featuring whirling dervishes.
I'm showing you my book called Nadim. So inside is a work about the dervish. It's a branch of Islam. It's a kind of sect. Only men are allowed to dance. The fact that it was also closed doors to the outside world. So it was kind of a secret world to me. What I wanted to try in this book is always what I try to do in my work, means to be creative. So when you look at the pictures, all of them are completely different.
An artist from Santa Cruz, Matt Cohn, created this handmade box to house the book titled Colored People, a compilation of photos by Cameroonian photographer Blake Jean Owen.
He traveled there in 2005 and took over 100 photographs, fully immersing himself in the culture. And when he came back, he decided that he would select the people in the photographs and keep them in color. And then he turned the rest of the information into black and white. So what you see here is the result of his efforts. We took these images and we realized that they would really behave and operate in a meaningful way if we put them into the context of a book called Colored People. What you see here is this series of 20 images that we pared down from over 100. The images themselves show a diverse range of different ages and genders and capture this true beauty of the color and the vibrancy of African culture.
The exhibit is on display through September 11th. Books featured in Artist Books in Africa are from the permanent collections of the Smithsonian Libraries, Warren M. Robins Library, and the Smithsonian National Museum of African Art. Carolyn Turner, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Here is a story that has to do with defects or problems with cars.
Listen for the word that means to take back something. Recall.
They had meetings over this defect. They shared complaints over this defect. Yet there was no investigation by the government and no recall by General Motors until 10 years later.
Recall. It is a word that means to ask people officially to return something.
In our story, there were major problems with some General Motors cars. The man says the U.S. government and the car company took too long to issue a recall, so the cars could be fixed.
Now, when you hear the word recall, your American English will be good enough to know what this news word means.